It's time now for our Wall Street Week daily segment with host David Westin, who joins us now. And David, you always have a great lineup of folks that you talk to, but one reliable guy is Larry Summers, and what he says is so critical for our understanding of policy.
Yeah, every week we have Larry. We're fortunate to have Larry, and we're going to have him again this week, about an hour and 15 minutes from right now. We talked about a wide range of subjects, but one of them was what Secretary of Treasury, or his successor, Janet Yellen, had to say about China this week. What did he think about her remarks? This is part of what he said.
I admire Secretary Yellen, and I think the tone of her speech was very much appropriate. There's a phrase in the export control community, small garden, high walls, that I think captures exactly the philosophy that you need to figure out what absolutely needs to be restricted and restrict it strongly, and not try to go after everything else. I remain concerned, though, that the United States needs to go beyond a wish list in its negotiation strategy, that it needs to negotiate privately rather than publicly, that it needs to recognize that an important part of what we're doing has to be strengthening our own capacities at home in terms of innovation, strengthening our capacities for cooperation with the rest of the world. Look, we have renounced new trade agreements as a major tool of strategy. We have declined to reduce tariffs, even where reducing tariffs would improve the competitiveness of our exports. And we just aren't providing resources to the world on the scale that the Chinese are. I remarked last week on your show about people in the developing world who felt they got lectures from us and airports from the Chinese. And even though they agreed with the lectures from us, the airports really weren't the same as the lectures. They were vastly more valuable. And we've got to be fixing that very aggressively. And I don't see that in the approach that we're taking to the international financial institutions in terms of promoting their expansion. I don't see that in terms of ways in which we're trying to rally countries towards economic integration. If we have a theme for our multilateralism, it is the distinction between countries that have more elections and countries that don't have elections, rather than countries that share our fundamental interests versus countries that don't. So I think there's a lot more that we have to do. And perhaps the most important point, David, is that the right strategy towards China has to combine deterrence and reassurance. We do have to deter all sorts of problematic things that the Chinese have done and have indicated they might do in the future. We also have to provide reassurance that we are prepared to allow them to grow, to take a place in the global economy that is commensurate with their profound economic achievements. And I think we have not always provided that kind of reassurance, and we need to find that going forward here.
As this week draws to a close, the various people are reporting, including Bloomberg, that apparently President Biden may well announce that he was running for re-election early next week. I know you're a macroeconomist, you're not a political advisor. At the same time, the one can affect the other. What do you think of the political situation in the United States today?
Clearly, there are many people who are worried about the degree of polarization in our country, and they're right to be worried. None of us will forget January 6th for as long as we live. But I think sometimes we need to recognize the power of self-denying prophecy as fear does the work of reason. Everybody expected that the 2022 elections would be highly contentious, that there'd be debate about the outcomes, that there would be some terrible demagogues elected. And while I liked some of the results in 2022 and I liked others less, I think everybody would agree that that election came off much better than was widely feared. And probably it came off much better precisely because of the wide fears. So I'm a little more inclined to think that America goes through these spasms of doubt about its political system, like we did when Jimmy Carter declared a crisis of the national spirit, and that we will find ways of working through it. Now, there are no guarantees and no basis for complacency, but I was glad to see President Biden moving towards making his announcement, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see things move in favorable directions.